The stars looked different this far from Earth. Captain Lihana stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the view screen display thousands of points of light she had never seen before. Her ship had been traveling for 3 months, mapping new sectors near the Andromeda Gateway. It was supposed to be a routine mission. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Park Min-ho from the communications station. He was her chief linguist and oldest friend. They had served together for almost 10 years now. Hana walked over to his station. "What kind of strange?" "A signal. It's repeating every 30 seconds. Minho adjusted his headset and frowned. "It sounds like a distress call, but the language is—" "I know this language. Can you translate it?" "I don't need to translate it." "Captain, they're speaking Latin." Hana blinked. "Latin, the Dead Earth language?" "That's impossible, but yes. Perfect classical Latin. They're saying, 'Help us, engines failing, life support critical.'" Minho looked up at her with confusion in his eyes. "How is an alien species speaking Latin?" From the engineering station, Choi Yuna called out, "Captain, I've got their location. They're only 20,000 kilometers away. Small vessel definitely in trouble." Hana made her decision quickly. "Set intercept course. Yuna, prepare the docking bay. Minho, open a channel." "Channel open," Minho said. Hana spoke clearly. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Lee Hana of the Earthship Horizon's Edge. We received your distress call. We are approaching to render assistance." She spoke in English, as was standard for first contact situations, but Minho, acting on instinct, repeated her message in Latin. His pronunciation was flawless, honed by years of academic study. The response came immediately, but it wasn't grateful. It was horrified. A harsh clicking voice erupted from the speakers. The words were in a language none of them recognized, but the tone was clear. Anger, fear, shock. "What did I say?" Minho asked, his face pale. The alien ship appeared on their view screen. It was small, damaged, venting atmosphere from a crack in its hull, but despite its distress, it was trying to move away from them. "They're running from us," Yuna said. "Their engines are failing, but they're still trying to escape." "Minho, what's happening?" Hana demanded. "I don't know. I just repeated your message in their language, the language they were using for their distress call." The alien voice came again, this time with a translation matrix attempting to process it. The ship's computer managed to parse some words. "Blasphemy. Sacred tongue. How dare. Abomination." Hana felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "They're angry that we spoke Latin?" "It doesn't make sense," Minho said. "They were speaking it first. Why would they—" The alien ship's engines died completely. It went dark, tumbling slowly in space. "Captain, their life support just failed," Yuna reported. "If we don't get them aboard in the next 10 minutes, they'll suffocate." Hana didn't hesitate. "Yuna, use the tractor beam. Bring them into docking bay 2. Minho, prepare the medical bay for unknown species. I don't care if they're angry at us. We're not letting anyone die." The next hour was chaos. The alien crew consisted of 4 beings unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They were tall, nearly 3 meters, with elongated heads and skin that shimmered between blue and purple. Their hands had 6 fingers each, and their eyes were large and golden. The moment they were revived in the medical bay, they began shouting. The translation matrix worked better now, and Hana could understand them clearly. "You speak the tongue of the ancients. You dare profane the sacred language. What are you? Thieves? Demons?" The leader of the alien group, who identified himself as Velthrim named Kale, refused to calm down. His 3 crew members stood behind him, their faces showing the same mixture of rage and terror. Hana kept her voice level. "We saved your lives. We responded to your distress call, which you broadcast in Latin. We simply answered in the same language." "Latin?" Kale's translator struggled with the word. "You name the sacred tongue with such casual irreverence?" "It's not sacred to us," Minho interjected. He stepped forward, his scholar's curiosity overcoming his caution. "Latin is an ancient language from our world. It was spoken by an empire called Rome over 2,000 years ago. It's been dead as a common language for more than a millennium, but we still study it, use it in science and law." The Velthrim stared at him as if he had just claimed to be a god. "Impossible," Cal whispered. "The tongue of the ancients was given to the Velthrim by the first ones, the gods who walked among our people 800,000 years ago. No other species knows it. No other species can know it. It is forbidden. Forbidden." Hana felt her temper rising. We're from Earth, we speak what we want. Latin came from our world, from our history. Lies. One of the other Velthrim shouted. You have stolen sacred knowledge. You have committed the greatest sin known to the Galactic Assembly. Yuna spoke up from her position by the door. Captain, I'm reading more ships approaching. A lot of ships. The view screen lit up with new contacts. Dozens of vessels, all broadcasting the same insignia. The Velthrim had called for help. Kale's voice was cold now, all fear replaced by righteous fury. You will come with us to Cathara Prime. You will stand before the Grand Assembly. You will explain how you came to possess the tongue of the ancients, and you will face judgment for your heresy. We committed no heresy, Hana said firmly. We spoke our own language. Your language? Kale laughed bitterly. The tongue was given to us by gods. It appears in our most ancient texts, taught to us by beings of light who descended from the stars. It is the language of creation, of divine law, of sacred ritual. For 800,000 years, only the priestly caste has been permitted to speak it. And you claim it is yours? Mino pulled up a holographic display, showing images of ancient Roman texts, medieval manuscripts, scientific documents. Look, here. This is the Aeneid written 2,000 years ago. This is the Corpus Juris Civilis. This is Principia Mathematica, where Isaac Newton described the laws of physics, all in Latin, all from Earth. But Kale and his crew wouldn't look. They turned away as if the images themselves were poisonous. We do not look upon forgeries and lies, Kale said. You will come with us or we will take you by force. The Grand Assembly will determine the truth. Hana looked at her crew. Mino was frustrated but fascinated. Yuna was calculating odds, her hand near the weapons console. Outside, the Velthrim fleet surrounded them, 50 ships to their one. She made a decision that would change everything. We'll go with you, Hana said. We'll stand before your Grand Assembly. We'll prove that Latin is a human language born on Earth, preserved by human hands. And we won't apologize for speaking what's ours. Kale's eyes narrowed. Your confidence will be your undoing. No species can claim the tongue of the ancients. You will be proven liars or thieves. Either way, you will face the consequences. As the Velthrim fleet escorted the horizon's edge toward their holy world, Hana stood on the bridge and watched the stars pass by. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans and aliens shared a language that should have been impossible, and she was going to find out why. Cathara Prime was beautiful in a way that made Hana's chest ache. The planet glowed blue and gold from space, with massive crystal structures visible even from orbit. These weren't buildings. They were temples, each one carved from a single piece of translucent stone that caught the light of 3 suns. The horizon's edge landed in a designated area, surrounded by Velthrim security forces. Hana, Minho, and Yuna were escorted from their ship by armed guards who never spoke directly to them. They were treated like dangerous criminals. The Cathedral of First Words rose before them like a mountain made of light. Inside, the ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadows. Thousands of Velthrim filled the chamber, along with representatives from dozens of other alien species. This was the Grand Assembly, and every eye was on the 3 humans. At the center of the cathedral stood a raised platform. On it sat 7 figures in elaborate robes. The High Priest of the Velthrim, an ancient being whose skin had faded to almost white, sat in the middle. His name was Therum, and his voice echoed through the chamber without any visible amplification. Beings of Earth, Therum began, you stand accused of the greatest crime known to civilized space. You have spoken the tongue of the ancients, a language forbidden to all but the chosen. How do you answer this charge? Hana stepped forward. She had prepared for this moment during the 3-day journey to Cathara Prime. We answer that we committed no crime. The language you call the tongue of the ancients is called Latin on Earth. It is our language from our history, and no one can forbid us from speaking it. A wave of shocked murmurs ran through the assembly. Several alien species made sounds of disbelief. Therum raised one long hand for silence. You claim ownership of the sacred tongue? You, a species we had never encountered until 6 days ago? We don't claim ownership, Minho said, stepping up beside Hana. Languages don't belong to anyone. But Latin developed on Earth, evolved on Earth, and has been part of human civilization for over 2,000 years. We can prove it. Prove it! Another priest, younger but equally decorated, stood up. His name was Vekran, and his voice dripped with contempt. You will show us forgeries, fabrications, Lies designed to excuse your theft of sacred knowledge. Una activated a holographic projector she had been allowed to bring. Images filled the air above them. Ancient Roman coins, inscriptions on stone, pages from illuminated manuscripts, botanical texts, legal documents, religious scripture. This is the Rosetta Stone, Minho explained, pointing to an image. It dates back to Earth year 196 BCE. It contains the same text in 3 languages: Greek, Demotic Egyptian, and Latin. This is how we first learned to read our own ancient languages. This is the Gutenberg Bible, he continued, showing another image, printed in Earth year 1455, written entirely in Latin. This, Una added, pulling up chemical formulas and mathematical equations, is how we still use Latin today. Every element on the periodic table has a Latin name. Aurum for gold, ferrum for iron, hydrogenium for hydrogen. Every species of life on Earth is classified using Latin. Homo sapiens, canis familiaris, Quercus alba. The assembly watched in silence as image after image appeared. Monuments, books, scrolls, medical texts, legal codes. 2,000 years of human history, all documented, all containing Latin. Theram's expression didn't change. Impressive fabrications. Your species has clearly invested significant resources into creating this false history. Hana felt anger surge through her. These aren't fabrications. We have physical artifacts, carbon dating, archaeological sites, genetic evidence linking human populations to Latin-speaking regions. What proof would satisfy you? None, Vekran said flatly. Because the truth is already known. The ancients came to Cathara Prime 800,000 years ago. They walked among our people. They taught us the sacred tongue. They gave us the principles of law, science, and faith. Then they ascended, returning to the realm of the divine. This is recorded in our oldest texts. This is witnessed by 100 species who learned of the ancients through us. 800,000 years? Minho's eyes widened. That's impossible. Latin as we know it only emerged around 3,000 years ago on Earth. Then you admit your claim is false, Theram said. No! Minho shook his head frantically. I'm saying there's a contradiction here. Both of our histories can't be true unless you are lying, Vekran interrupted. Or unless you are thieves who somehow stole the knowledge and fabricated a history around it. Hana stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. We're not thieves. We're not liars. And we're not going to submit to your judgment based on religious beliefs. The entire assembly erupted in outrage. Alien voices from a dozen different species shouted in their own languages. The translation matrix struggled to keep up. Theram raised both hands and silence fell like a hammer. You dare question the faith of the Velthrim? You dare call our sacred history mere belief? I call it what it is, Hana said. A story passed down through generations. A story that might be true or might be misunderstood or might be missing important details, just like our stories might be. But I won't let you punish my crew for speaking a language that exists in our textbooks, our museums, our universities. Then what do you propose? Theram's voice was dangerously quiet. Hana took a breath. This was the gamble, a challenge. Give us the chance to prove our claim. Not with holograms or words, but with evidence you can test yourself. Let us show you Earth. Let your scientists examine our artifacts. Let your linguists study our records. If we're lying, you'll know. If we're telling the truth, you'll have to accept it. The 7 priests conferred in whispers. The assembly watched and waited. Finally, Theram spoke. We accept your challenge. But understand this. If you fail to prove your claim, if even one piece of your evidence is shown to be false, you will submit to our judgment. The penalty for speaking the tongue of the ancients without divine sanction is erasure. Erasure? Una asked. Vekran smiled coldly. Your knowledge of the sacred tongue will be removed from your minds. Every human who speaks it will be found and cleansed. Your species will be forbidden from ever learning it again. On penalty of extinction. Minho grabbed Hana's arm. Captain, that's insane. We can't agree to that. But Hana was looking at Theram, seeing something in the ancient priest's eyes. Doubt, perhaps. Or curiosity. He wanted to know the truth even if it challenged everything he believed. We accept, Hana said. But if we prove our claim, you have to accept that Latin is a human language. You have to allow us to speak it freely without accusations of heresy. Theram nodded slowly. Agreed. We will send our finest scholars and scientists to Earth. They will have 3 months to examine your evidence. If they determine you speak the truth, the Velthrim will acknowledge your claim. If they determine you lie, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. As the assembly dispersed, Hana, Minho, and Yuna were escorted back to their ship. They would return to Earth with a Velthrim delegation in tow, carrying the weight of their entire species' future. We just bet the survival of the human race on archaeological evidence, Yuna said quietly. Minho was already pulling up files, making lists, contacting universities and museums across Earth. Then we better make sure our evidence is perfect. Hana looked out at the crystal temples of Cathara Prime, glowing in the light of 3 suns. Somewhere in the galaxy's history, humans and Velthrim had become connected by a language that should have been impossible. She was going to find out how, even if it meant challenging the gods themselves. Earth had never seen anything like the Velthrim delegation. 12 scholars, 7 scientists, and High Priest Therum himself arrived aboard the Horizon's Edge 6 weeks after the trial. They stepped onto Earth soil for the first time in Rome, at the Colosseum, where Latin had once echoed through ancient stone. Hana watched Therum's face as he looked at the massive structure. The old priest showed no emotion, but his eyes lingered on every detail. "This is where your evidence begins?" Therum asked. "This is where our civilization spoke Latin as a living language," Minho said. He had barely slept since returning to Earth, coordinating with historians, archaeologists, and linguists from every major university. The Colosseum was built in Earth year 80 CE. That's 1,167 years ago. Every inscription you see here is in Latin. The Velthrim scholars spread out examining the stonework. They carried sophisticated scanning equipment that could analyze the age of materials, detect forgeries, and trace chemical compositions. They worked in silence for hours. Vekrin, who had insisted on joining the delegation, pointed to an inscription. This could have been carved recently and artificially aged. "Then test it," Hana said. "That's why you're here." For 3 days, the Velthrim team examined the Colosseum. They tested stone, analyzed weathering patterns, studied the iron clamps that held blocks together. They dug into the foundation and extracted samples from deep within the structure, where human hands could not have reached without demolishing the entire building. On the 4th day, one of the Velthrim scientists approached Therum and spoke in their own language. The translation came through a moment later. "The structure is authentic, age confirmed at approximately 2,000 years. Therum's face remained neutral. "One structure proves nothing. Languages can be added later." Minho had expected this. "Then let's go deeper." They traveled to the Vatican Library, where ancient manuscripts waited in climate-controlled vaults. Minho had arranged access to documents that few humans ever saw: original texts from the early days of Christianity, legal codes from the Roman Empire, scientific treatises from medieval scholars. The Velthrim scholars examined each document with intense scrutiny. They analyzed the ink, the parchment, the binding. They used spectroscopy to date the organic materials. They compared linguistic styles across centuries. A Velthrim linguist named Sareth spent an entire week analyzing a single manuscript, a copy of Virgil's Aeneid from the 4th century CE. She studied every word, every grammatical construction, every poetic meter. Finally, she spoke to Therum in their private chamber. Hana had insisted on being present for all discussions, and Therum had allowed it. "The language is consistent," Sareth said quietly. "The grammar matches classical Latin as they describe it. The vocabulary is appropriate for the claimed time period. The degradation of the ink and parchment aligns with the stated age." She paused. "If this is a forgery, it is beyond perfect. It would require technology we do not possess." "Could they have stolen ancient Velthrim texts and copied them?" Vekrin suggested. Yuna, who had been monitoring from the corner, pulled up a holographic display. "Not possible. We've analyzed your ancient text too. The writing system is different. The vocabulary has diverged. Latin evolved on Earth independently, developing unique characteristics that don't exist in your version of the language." She showed comparative analyses, word usage patterns, grammatical structures, phonetic evolution. Earth's Latin had developed into Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. The Velthrim version had remained frozen, unchanged, sacred. "Our Latin was alive," Minho explained. "It grew, changed, split into new languages. Yours was preserved perfectly. like a religious text that can never be altered. That's not how languages work naturally. It's how they work when they're imposed from outside. Theron's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that your ancients didn't create Latin. They brought it to you, already formed, already complete. The chamber fell silent. Over the next month, the Velthrim delegation traveled across Earth. They examined Roman roads in Britain, tested aqueducts in Spain, analyzed amphitheaters in Turkey. They studied botanical gardens where every plant bore a Latin name. They visited medical schools where anatomy was still taught using Latin terminology. They met with geneticists who showed how Latin-speaking populations had spread across Europe, their DNA traceable through thousands of years. In a laboratory in Geneva, a human geneticist named Dr. Kim Yoonji presented her findings. We can trace human migration patterns through genetic markers. The people who spoke Latin in ancient Rome have descendants across modern Europe and the Americas. Their genetic signatures are distinct and documentable. If Latin was stolen from aliens, these genetic patterns would make no sense. Sareth examined the data carefully. She was perhaps the most objective of the Velthrim scholars, driven by genuine curiosity rather than religious certainty. The evidence is compelling, she admitted, but it creates an impossible paradox. What paradox? Hannah asked. Your Latin is approximately 2,000 to 3,000 years old as a written language. Our records show the tongue of the ancients being taught to the Velthrim 800,000 years ago. Sareth displayed a hologram of ancient Velthrim texts. These are our oldest surviving writings. They describe the coming of the first ones, beings of light who spoke in the sacred tongue. The dating of these texts is absolute. They are 800,000 years old. Minho leaned forward. Are you certain? Your civilization has existed that long? Our civilization has existed for approximately 1 million years, Theron said. We have continuous historical records for most of that time. The arrival of the ancients is our most thoroughly documented event. Una was already running calculations on her datapad. Then the same language existed in two places, separated by vast distances and almost 800,000 years. That's impossible unless someone traveled through time, Minho finished. The room erupted in argument. Several Velthrim scholars rejected the idea immediately. Time travel was theoretical at best, forbidden by the known laws of physics. But Sareth was thoughtful. Or unless the ancients were not gods but travelers from Earth's future. Theron stood abruptly. That is blasphemy, is it? Sareth turned to face the high priest. You taught me to seek truth above comfort, Theron. The evidence before us is clear. These humans possess the sacred tongue. Their claim is legitimate. Their history is documented and verifiable. If we refuse to accept this, we are no better than those who burn books because they fear knowledge. But 800,000 years, Vekran protested. How can their language be ours when ours predates theirs by such an immense span of time? Hannah had been thinking about this for weeks. She spoke slowly, working through the logic. What if the ancients who visited your world weren't gods or aliens? What if they were humans? Humans from our far future, somehow able to travel backward in time. They visited your world, shared Latin with your ancestors, and then, what, disappeared? Died? Minho picked up the thread. It would create a bootstrap paradox. Latin exists on Earth because humans developed it. But Latin exists on Cathera Prime because future humans brought it there. The language loops through time, creating itself. This is madness, Vekran said. But his voice lacked conviction. Theron was silent for a long moment. Then he said, If what you suggest is true, then the first ones, the beings my people have worshipped for 800 millennia, were human. Not divine. Not gods, simply you. We don't know that, Hannah said gently. We only know that the evidence points to a connection we don't fully understand yet. Theron looked at her, and for the first time she saw the weight he carried. 800,000 years of faith, millions of Velthrim who believed in the divine origin of their most sacred tradition, and now, evidence that suggested it all came from mortal beings who didn't even know they would become gods. We need more proof, Theron said finally. If the ancients were truly human, there must be other evidence. Technology, artifacts, something that connects your species to ours across time. Una looked up from her datapad. There might be. When we first encountered Kale's ship, I detected unusual energy signatures. I've been analyzing them against Earth's theoretical physics databases. There's a match to a hypothetical propulsion system, that requires exotic matter and precise gravitational manipulation. The kind of technology that could theoretically enable time travel. Where would we find such technology? Sareth asked. Not here, Una said. But maybe somewhere between Earth and Cathera Prime. If the ancients were time travelers, they had to come from somewhere. They had to leave something behind. Hana felt the pieces shifting in her mind. Then we need to search. We need to find evidence of these future humans, proof that they existed and visited your world. Therium nodded slowly. The Grand Assembly will want answers. So will my people. I will support an expedition to search for the truth wherever it leads. As the meeting ended, Minho pulled Hana aside. Do you realize what this means? If we're right, somewhere in humanity's future, we become advanced enough to travel through time. We become the gods of an alien species, and we've been speaking our own legacy all along. Hana looked out the window at Earth's moon, hanging bright in the night sky. Somewhere out there, hidden in space or time, was the answer to an impossible question, and she was going to find it. The expedition consisted of 3 ships, the Horizon's Edge, a Velthrim research vessel called the Sacred Truth, and a smaller scout ship piloted by Una. They searched a region of space roughly halfway between Earth and Cathara Prime, looking for anything unusual. For 6 weeks they found nothing. Empty space, dead stars, lifeless rocks. Hana was beginning to think this was a waste of time when Una's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain, I've got something. You need to see this. The coordinates led them to a small planet orbiting a dying red star. The planet was dead, its atmosphere long since stripped away. Its surface a barren wasteland of gray dust and black rock. But Una's sensors had detected something beneath the surface. A massive artificial structure. They landed together, humans and Velthrim working side by side. Therium insisted on being part of the landing party, despite his advanced age. Sareth and Vekrin accompanied him along with Hana, Minho, and Una. The entrance to the structure was marked by a simple monument, a pillar of black stone with inscriptions carved into its surface. Minho approached it carefully, his scanner reading the text. Latin, he whispered. It says, "Here lies the memory of those who traveled too far," and below it in another script. That's Korean. Hana's breath caught. Korean, are you sure? Minho ran his hand over the carved letters. The inscription says, "We came from Earth. We tried to fix what we broke. Forgive us, it's dated." This can't be right. The date is 847,134 years from now. Therium stepped forward, his golden eyes fixed on the monument. That would place it 2,000 years after the ancients visited Cathura Prime. They were here after visiting your world, Sareth said softly. This was their final destination. The structure itself was enormous, carved into the planet's crust and extending down for kilometers. The interior was still pressurized, maintained by power systems that had run for almost 1,000,000 years. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they entered, revealing corridors lined with strange technology. Una's eyes lit up with recognition. This is human design, advanced, incredibly advanced, but definitely human. Look at the control interfaces, the labeling systems. Everything is sized for human hands, human heights. They moved deeper into the facility. The walls were covered with data screens, most of them dark and dead, but a few still functioning. Minho found a terminal that responded to his touch, and holographic displays sprang to life. It's a research station, he said, scrolling through files. A time travel research station. They were experimenting with... Oh no, what is it? Hana asked. Minho's face had gone pale. They weren't trying to travel through time on purpose. They were trying to prevent a catastrophe. According to these logs, in Earth's far future, sometime around the year 849,000, there was a massive temporal disaster, a quantum event that threatened to collapse causality itself. The only way to stop it was to go back in time and create a stable temporal loop. Sareth was reading over his shoulder. They chose to visit Cathera Prime? Not at first. Minho opened another file showing mission logs. They tried multiple approaches, but every intervention they attempted made things worse. Finally, they realized the only stable solution was to create a cultural and linguistic connection between humanity and another species. A connection strong enough to anchor certain points in space-time. Therium's voice was barely a whisper. We were chosen to be that anchor. You were chosen because you were there, Minho said gently. Your species was old, stable, advanced. The time travelers made contact with ancient Velthrim, shared knowledge, taught Latin. They established religious and cultural practices that would preserve that knowledge for hundreds of thousands of years, creating an unchanging reference point in time. Bekran was shaking his head. They manipulated us, turned us into tools. They saved the universe, Una said, pulling up technical readouts. Look at this. The temporal calculations show that without the intervention, the quantum collapse would have erased billions of years of history. Earth, Cathera Prime, hundreds of other worlds would have never existed. Hana found another terminal, this one containing personal logs. She activated it and a hologram appeared. A human woman in a strange uniform, her face tired but determined. My name is Captain Song Mirai, the hologram said in Korean. Minho's translator converted it to Latin for the Velthrim. If you're seeing this, then our mission succeeded. The temporal loop is stable. The universe still exists, but we paid a terrible price. The hologram showed images of a crew, 12 humans all wearing the same uniform, all looking exhausted. We came from an Earth 800,000 years in your future. We saw our timeline beginning to collapse, causality unraveling. We built a temporal drive using theories that wouldn't be developed for hundreds of millennia. We went back, far back, to a time when the universe was young and malleable. Song Mirai's image flickered. We made contact with the Velthrim people. We taught them Latin because it was a language we knew wouldn't change on Earth, a language that would be preserved in our past. We gave them principles of science and law, hoping it would stabilize their culture. We stayed for 50 years, long enough to be remembered, to be turned into legends. The hologram showed the crew leaving Cathera Prime, their ship damaged, their faces grim. But we couldn't go home, Song Mirai continued. The temporal drive was dying. The exotic matter was decaying. We had enough power for one more jump, so we came here, to this dead world between our home and theirs. We built this facility to record what we did, to leave a message for anyone who might wonder why Latin exists in two places separated by time and space. Tears were running down the hologram's face. We became gods to the Velthrim. We never wanted that. We just wanted to save everyone. And now we're going to die here, alone, knowing that we succeeded but unable to see the future we preserved. The hologram shifted to show the interior of the facility, now pristine and new. This station will run for 1,000,000 years, long enough for humanity to develop naturally on Earth, long enough for the Velthrim to preserve our teachings, long enough for both our peoples to meet, to question, to search for the truth. Song Mirai looked directly at the camera. To whoever finds this, we were not divine. We were just people who were willing to sacrifice everything to save everything. We spoke Latin because it was our heritage, our history, our connection to the past. We gave it to the Velthrim because we needed to create a bridge across time. The hologram began to fade. Tell Earth that we succeeded. Tell the Velthrim that the ancients were human, flawed and mortal, but driven by love for all living beings. And tell both our peoples that they are connected now, bound by more than language, bound by sacrifice. The image disappeared. The chamber was silent. Therum had sunk to his knees, his golden eyes closed. Sareth stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Bekran was staring at the empty space where the hologram had been, his face unreadable. Hana felt the weight of it all crashing down. Those 12 humans had died here, alone on a dead world to save a future they would never see. They had become the gods of an alien species, not through power or divinity, but through sacrifice. Minho was crying openly. They gave the Velthrim everything they needed to survive and thrive. And they gave us a mystery that would eventually bring our two species together. Una pulled up the facility's final logs. They died within a year of recording that message. Life support failure. They're buried here in a chamber deeper in the facility. Therum stood slowly. I must see them. I must see the faces of the beings my people worshipped for 800,000 years. They descended deeper into the facility, following the map Una had extracted. The burial chamber was simple, almost austere. 12 pods, each containing a preserved body. The humans had died in their sleep peacefully after recording their final messages. Above each pod was a nameplate inscribed in Korean and Latin. Song Mirai, Captain. Park Daeho, Navigator. Kim Hyejin, Engineer. 12 names. 12 humans who had become immortal through myth. Therum approached the pod slowly, looking at each face. They are so small, he said softly. So fragile. And yet they shaped the course of our entire civilization. Not through force, Sareth said. Through knowledge. Through sharing. Through trust that we would preserve what they taught us. Hana read the final inscription on the wall of the chamber. We are from Earth. We speak what we want. We give it freely to those who need it. May our two peoples meet in friendship in the distant future, and may they understand why we did what we did. Vekrin was the last to speak. I called you thieves. I called you blasphemers. I wanted you punished for speaking the sacred tongue. He looked at Hana and his eyes were filled with shame. But you were speaking your birthright, a birthright your descendants gave to my ancestors. You were always meant to speak Latin. The ancients wanted you to. Therim placed his hand on the nearest pod, his palm against the transparent surface. We will bring this knowledge back to Kethera Prime. The Grand Assembly must know the truth. My people must know that the ancients were not gods but heroes, human heroes who loved the universe enough to die for it. As they prepared to leave the facility, Minho made a copy of all the data, all the logs, all the evidence. This was the answer to an impossible question. This was the bridge between two species separated by time, space, and evolution. Hana took one last look at the burial chamber. We'll make sure your sacrifice wasn't in vain, she said to the sleeping figures. We'll make sure both our peoples know what you did. The journey back to Kethera Prime would take months, but now they traveled not as adversaries but as two peoples connected by an ancient gift, given in love and preserved in faith. The Grand Assembly chamber on Kethera Prime had never been so crowded. Representatives from 200 species filled every available space, all waiting to hear the findings of the Veltrim expedition to Earth. Hovering cameras broadcast the proceedings across the galaxy. Hana stood before the assembly once more, but this time she wasn't alone. Therim stood beside her, the ancient high priest who had once called her a blasphemer. Zareth was there too, along with Minho and Yuna. Behind them, on massive holographic displays, played the recorded message of Captain Song Mirai. The chamber fell silent as the hologram spoke. 200 species listened to the story of 12 humans who had traveled 800,000 years into the past to save the universe. They heard about the quantum collapse, the desperate mission, the choice to create a temporal anchor by sharing knowledge with the Velthrim. When the message ended, the silence continued. Then slowly it was broken by the sound of Therim's voice. For 800,000 years my people worshipped the ancients as gods, he said. His voice was steady, but Hana could see the emotion in his golden eyes. We preserved their teachings as sacred law. We forbade anyone outside the priestly caste from speaking the tongue they gave us. We built our entire civilization around the belief that we were chosen by divine beings. He paused, looking out at the assembly. We were chosen, but not by gods, by people. People who saw our ancestors and thought, these beings can help save everything. People who trusted us to preserve what they taught us, to keep it safe and unchanged for hundreds of millennia. People who died alone on a forgotten world, knowing they had succeeded but unable to return home. Therim turned to Hana. The humans we accused of blasphemy were speaking their own language, a language their descendants gave to us as a gift across time. We had no right to forbid it. We had no right to threaten them for speaking what was always theirs. Vekrin stepped forward from the Velthrim delegation. I owe the humans an apology. I let faith blind me to truth. I let tradition override evidence. When faced with the impossible, I chose to deny rather than to question. He looked at Hana, Minho, and Yuna. The humans showed more honor than I did. They were willing to risk everything to prove the truth, while I was willing to destroy them to preserve comfortable lies. A representative from the Korthan Collective, a species known for their philosophical traditions, spoke up. What does this mean for the sacred texts of the Velthrim? For 800,000 years of religious practice, Sareth answered. It means we must reinterpret them. The ancients were real. They did come to us and teach us. They did share profound knowledge. But they were not gods. They were heroes. Mortals who performed an act of ultimate sacrifice. She smiled sadly. Perhaps that makes their gift more precious, not less. They gave us everything, asking nothing in return except that we preserve it. Another voice from the assembly, a Rethian diplomat. Will the Velthrim abandon their faith? Therim shook his head. Faith is not destroyed by truth. It is refined by it. We will still honor the ancients. We will still preserve their teachings. But we will do so knowing they were people like us, capable of extraordinary courage, and we will honor the bond they created between Velthrim and humanity, a bond 800,000 years old. The holographic display changed, showing the burial chamber on the dead world. 12 pods, 12 humans who would never see Earth again. Minho spoke, his voice thick with emotion. These people saved the universe. They saved Earth before it existed. They saved Cathera Prime and every species here, and they did it knowing they would die in the attempt. That's not divine. That's human. We have records of humans doing this throughout our history, sacrificing themselves for others, for principles, for the future. Yuna added, "We propose that the burial site become a memorial, a place where both humans and Velthrim can honor those who gave everything. And we propose something else, a joint Human-Velthrim Research Institute to study temporal mechanics, to understand what Song Mirai and her crew did, to make sure their sacrifice is never forgotten." The vote was unanimous. The Grand Assembly agreed to recognize Latin as a shared language, equally owned by humanity and the Velthrim. They agreed to establish the memorial. They agreed to create the institute. But more than that, something fundamental had changed. 3 months later, Hana stood at the opening ceremony of the Temporal Research Institute. It was built on neutral ground, on a space station at the midpoint between Earth and Cathera Prime. The building was beautiful, designed by both human and Velthrim architects, blending the styles of both civilizations. The faculty included scholars from both species. Minho had accepted a position as head of the linguistics department, working alongside Sareth to study how Latin had evolved differently on two worlds. Yuna was leading the engineering team, attempting to understand the temporal drive technology that Song Mirai's crew had used. Therum arrived for the ceremony, along with a delegation of Velthrim priests who had spent months studying Earth's history and human culture. They wore new robes designed to honor both the old traditions and the new understanding. On their chests in Latin letters was embroidered, "Not gods, heroes." "Captain Hana," Therum said, greeting her with the human custom of a handshake he had learned. "I have news from Cathera Prime. The Council of Priests has voted to open the study of Latin to all Velthrim. For the first time in 800,000 years, our people can speak the tongue of the ancients freely." Hana smiled. "How has your population reacted?" "With enthusiasm," Sareth said, joining them. "Especially the young. They see it as a connection to humanity, a bridge to a species who shares our oldest history." She pulled out a datapad and showed Hana a video. Young Velthrim children and human children learning Latin together in a classroom, laughing as they struggled with declensions and conjugations. "Language is alive again," Minho said, watching the video. "For us, Latin was a dead language we preserved in books. For the Velthrim, it was a sacred language locked away. Now it's becoming what it always should have been, a living bridge between people." The ceremony began with speeches from diplomats and scholars. But the moment that mattered most came when a young Velthrim student and a young human student stood together at the podium. They had written a speech in Latin, working together to honor the crew of Song Mirai. The Velthrim child spoke first. "We are the children of two worlds, bound by a gift given in love." The human child continued. "We speak a language that crosses time, that bridges species, that reminds us we are all connected. Together," they said, "we honor those who sacrificed everything. We promise to build the future they died to preserve." The audience stood in respect. Humans and Velthrim and 100 other species, all acknowledging the courage of 12 people who had become legends. After the ceremony, Hana walked through the Institute's memorial hall. On the walls were images of Song Mirai and her crew, their names inscribed in both Korean and Latin. Beside each name was a brief biography, translated into dozens of languages, telling the story of who they were before they became the ancients. Park Dae-ho had been a navigator who loved astronomy. Kim Hye-jin had been an engineer who played classical guitar. Each of them had been a person, with lives and loves and dreams, before they became the saviors of the universe. At the end of the hall was a new addition, a statue depicting a human and a Velthrim standing together, hands clasped with an inscription in Latin that read, "From sacrifice comes understanding. From understanding comes friendship. From friendship comes the future." Hana found Therum standing before the statue, his golden eyes reflecting the soft light. Do you regret learning the truth? Hana asked quietly. Therum considered the question. I regret the time wasted in denial. I regret threatening you and your crew. But learning the truth? No. The ancients were more admirable as mortal heroes than they ever were as distant gods. They chose to help us. They chose to sacrifice. That means more than divine mandate ever could. Your people are adapting well. Some better than others, Therum admitted. There are those who still struggle with the revelation, but most have found that their faith is stronger, not weaker, for knowing the truth. We still honor the ancients. We still preserve their teachings. We simply do it alongside humanity now as they intended. Vekrin approached, accompanied by a human scientist named Dr. Han Ji-won. The two had become close friends during the expedition to Earth, bonding over their shared love of archaeology. High Priest, Vekrin said, Dr. Han and I have been analyzing the temporal equations from the facility. We believe we may have found something. What is it? Hana asked. Dr. Han pulled up a holographic display. The temporal loop isn't closed. Song Mirai and her crew came from 800,000 years in the future, but there's no record of how they developed the technology to time travel. The equations suggest there should be another temporal event, something that completes the loop. Yuna, who had been listening, looked thoughtful. You mean we're supposed to do something? In our future? Possibly, Vekrin said. The mathematics suggests that the knowledge preserved by both our species, working together, will eventually lead to the development of temporal technology. We will create what Song Mirai used, and in doing so, complete the loop that saved the universe. Minho laughed. So the ancients gave the Velthrim knowledge to preserve. The Velthrim preserved it for 800,000 years. Humanity developed in parallel. We meet, we share knowledge, and eventually we create the very technology that allowed the ancients to exist. It's a perfect bootstrap paradox. It's destiny, Sareth said softly. It's responsibility, Hana corrected. Song Mirai and her crew trusted that both our species would eventually work together, would eventually create what they needed to exist. We can't let them down, Therum nodded. Then the work of this institute is even more important than we knew. We are not just honoring the past. We are building the future that makes the past possible. As the sun set on the space station, casting long shadows through the memorial hall, Hana stood with her friends and former adversaries looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, separated by vast gulfs of time, 12 humans had given everything to save everyone. They had connected two species across 800,000 years with nothing but language, trust, and hope. We're from Earth, Hana said quietly, speaking in Latin. We speak what we want. Therum replied in the same language, his accent carrying 800,000 years of careful preservation. And we are grateful that you do. Around them, human and Velthrim scholars worked together, learning from each other, building toward a future that would loop back to save the past. The language that had almost divided them now united them. The gift that had been given in sacrifice was now a bridge to tomorrow. And somewhere in the distant future, 800,000 years ahead, a crew of 12 would make the choice that started it all, knowing that their sacrifice would be remembered, honored, and continued by the species they saved. The universe turned on these small moments of connection. A language shared, a truth discovered, a friendship formed across the stars, and in the end, that was enough to save everything.